it's interesting too, like, and that's a whole nother realm of like what is acceptably like tolerated and what isn't. Right. She just said, hey, I want to buy blue products.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like even the fact that like in the state of California, like you are required to have a license to braid hair. Welcome to the Family God Podcast. We have a lot to talk about today, from Candace Cameron Bure and all the controversy around it to the Great American Family Network. So stay tuned.
So something really interesting going on in the like family media space is that the Great American Family Channel just had like their record-breaking their first Christmas movie, like broke all these records, right?
Wow, that's awesome.
However, now Candace is under fire for basically having market literacy of knowing like exactly who their market is. And then she said like, oh, you know, I only want to do family-based content, traditional family, blah, blah, blah. Well, then she got retweeted against, and all this stuff happened. So now there's all this controversy and everything because she basically just told people what she wanted to make.
I think that I think it's super cool about Great American Family doing well. Like I think it's cool that they knew their audience. They were willing to fight against all odds to be able to do something. You know, the Hallmark had removed the CEO, and then Great American Family had kind of brought him on, and he's brought in a lot of people from Hallmark over there, and I think it's just really cool that they understood their audience and they moved forward with it. It's interesting to me about the controversy with Candace, like you're saying, is, it's weird that the media twisted it so quickly about like how much she hated one group, and everything like that, how she hated the alternative community. And really, like, I think later on she even came out with like, oh, she loves everybody. But the point that's so interesting to me in our cancel culture world is the fact that like we've switched to a world of focusing on just the exception. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like if you think about it, like for a lot of times in human history, there have been other emphases in society, but we live in a society now that like, think about all the regulation that they're thinking about passing. They often are trying to pass it on the exception. Right. It used to be based on like the predominant predominant good for the majority of people was kind of like the emphasis, but now like the emphasis is on the exception in almost everything. Like look at like, I know you are a passionate person about cars. Like look at a lot of the car like regulations that they add now. It's all based on these exceptions. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I'm trying to think of a specific example lately of something I read the other day. But like even the fact that like in the state of California, like you are required to have a license to braid hair. You know what I mean? Like, why is that required? Like there must have been one exception where that is required. Like the majority of people who braid hair are perfectly normal to braid hair. You know what I mean? Like
my daughter's in big trouble.
Like we live in an age where it's like you hear about the one story on social media where the guy is like walking along and like the shark fell out of the sky and ate him, and then you're like, oh my gosh, sharks are gonna fall from the sky and and eat people, at all times. And it's just like, man, we've focused so much on the exception. And I think the interesting thing that comes to mind about this Candace thing is that like the beauty of capitalism is that there are a lot of different markets in the world. Okay. There are some people like one of our filmmakers here, Gabby, who loves blue. You know what I mean? Like she wants to buy products, right? Gabby, you want to buy blue products, that's amazing. And some people like myself, I love green, you know what I mean? And that is okay in the mix of it, and it doesn't mean that I hate blue because I want to buy like green. And it's interesting because it's like there is a market of people, like they tried to make the movie Bros. It didn't do well. It absolutely was a huge box office failure. But like if you wanted to see Christmas movies with alternative content, you can turn to Hallmark. You know what I mean? Like you can go to Lifetime, like every single one of the movies on Lifetime, you can do it. There is a lot of other people who are kind of like pushing towards that market. But like to be able to go after a market of like, hey, you just want to see a traditional romance between a man and a woman, like there's a market that's interested in that too. So just purely like if you remove any like faith element to it and you take it from a purely like secular basis, it makes sense. Like some people some people want to buy dogs and some people want to buy cats. You know what I mean? Like just if you take it just purely secular, that's why it's so interesting about the Great American Family like doing so well. It's because it's like, wow, it's proving like, hey, there is a market of people who just want to see this. Like there are a lot of other venues that you can watch other stuff. Like you can go to Lifetime at any time and see alternative content. You know what I mean? Like you can go to Hallmark and watch alternative movies. If you want to just see a traditional wife and husband, then you can go to Great American Family. Just from an audience perspective, there's an audience that cares about that. Now, the second thing, which I think is interesting, because Candace is someone who's a person of faith, is obviously she added a layer of faith element to it, you know, which like that's obviously important, you know, but it is interesting. It's interesting too, like, and that's a whole nother realm of like what is acceptably like tolerated and what isn't. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. In the mixture of our like current society.
I also think it's,
you know what I mean?
It's also interesting because they took it, like you said, they twisted the whole thing into like, oh, she's hateful and all this stuff towards this other group. She didn't say anything about that. Yeah. She didn't say, I hate this other group, so I'm going to do this. No. It was just like, this is what I believe, so I want to do this for this audience.
Right. She just said, hey, I want to buy blue products. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She didn't say like, oh, I hate green.
Turn green blue.
You know what I mean? Like she never said that, you know?
No. But of course they run with it and imply all these things and then make it some kind of, you know, attack. It's also funny too, because she literally came out publicly and said, I'm leaving Hallmark for the Great American Family to do these types of things. And she did this like 6 months ago or something. But now it's controversial again. Our old social media, that Candace's thing is the best Instagram reel we've ever had, you know, with thousands of likes and comments and stuff and people going back and forth on it. But
yeah, and hundreds of thousands of people like watching it. But I think, check that out on the Movie Guide Instagram. If you don't follow the Movie Guide Instagram, follow it. Well, I think that the one thing that was interesting is it was interesting how much, if you went on to like the forums and like the things, like how much people were just backing her, which was interesting. Like a lot of people kind of backed her in the mix. I think the other thing that's interesting, like on a broader scope, is like the idea of like how our society has shifted so much its identity. You know what I mean? Like where people like placing their identity in the mix of it. The thing is that like, I just think it's like for us as Christians, like our identity is in Christ. Yeah. That's it. You know what I mean? Like it's not the fact that my mom was from South America. It's not that, you know, it's not the color of your hair. Like it is not where you live or what you make or what your job is. It's only one thing. Mm-hmm. It's about Jesus, you know? And it's interesting in previous times in human history, you know, a lot of identity was like focused on, you know, where you lived. You know what I mean? It was like, oh, somebody is like English or someone's French. You know what I mean? Yeah. You know, we've become so like amalgamated too in a mix so that, you know, people don't care as much about like there was a book, there was a movie that came out recently about Brad Pitt, and he fell in love with like a German spy. Did you see that or whatever? I forgot what it was called. And it was interesting because I don't remember where it was, and hopefully I'm not making this up, but where like it didn't click as well with the modern day audience because they didn't understand why you would die for your country. Like why would he have ratted on his wife? Wow. You know what I mean? Like why wouldn't he just chosen love over like doing something for your country? Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's interesting because that was like a deep sense of identity at that period of time. You know what I mean? But like the interesting thing about like modern society is like our identity is so tied into our pleasures. Mm. You know what I mean? Because like think about like the things that are like cancel culturable, like fat shaming. You know what I mean? Like the pleasure of eating too much, you know what I mean, is now become like an identity. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like the way you want to like have sex or something is like fundamentally like an identity now. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, which might not have been like thought of as like a prime identifying factor. It might have been like one of many identifying factors.
Yeah.
You know, I know this is like really weird and like very philosophical and ethereal, so maybe it's not worth talking about. But like, I think that like, you know, obviously on one side, like people are feeling assaulted on now their identity. You know what I mean? But like society as a whole, like our identities have shifted. They're not grand anymore. It's all centered around pleasure. It's like, think about the fact that like, you know, coffee drinkers are offended when tea drinkers insult them. You know what I mean? Like, I was talking to a guy the other day, and you know, everybody has a dietary fad. So I was trying to connect with him to talk to him about Jesus. And I was like, I just figured like in our area, it's either like keto or vegan. And so I was like, oh, I just threw out the keto thing because I thought maybe that was it. And he got so angry about it because it was like, oh, he's only vegan, you know? And it's just like, oh my gosh, we've moved to this world of like absolute extremes, you know, based on like these like.
Well, it's a little offensive that Jesus didn't take into account gluten-free people when he said, I'm the bread of life. So
I just think that it's really like.
That was a joke, everybody.
Yes, he's joking. It's just very, very interesting. And like, I think that like in the midst of all of the craziness of the world, like it is an important element for us to like focus on our identity in Christ.
Yeah. And that's a constant. And
that's
never
a constant
shifts.
thing from all of human history. That's a constant thing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But like, I feel like I feel like it's just, I just think it's so interesting because it just feels like in human history, like things were focused so much on these grand things, you know, like, dying for like country or like if you read like one of the big pulls of like the ancient Greeks was like to be remembered, you know what I mean? And like, if you read the Odyssey, like the whole thing is about like, they wanted to be remembered. You know what I mean? And it's interesting because like those are not like the keys of today. Like the keys of today are all centered identity around different elements of pleasure. You know what I mean? And it's a very weird thing because it's not like transcendent. It's not like a big deal. It's a very like
it's like a modern version of idolatry is like imagining myself as this thing, and it's higher than everyone else's, and it has to feed this thing. It's like.
But I think that like for us as Christians, like it's such a key element to not fall into that. You know what I mean? And just like focus on like that our identities in Christ and that everybody's hurting, everybody's broken, and everybody needs God's love. You know what I mean? And like that is the only thing that gives you full fulfillment, you know? But it is kind of sad about her getting so cancel cultured, you know, but like, I think that like she said some like incredibly beautiful things, you know, about how much she loves people and stuff like that and how she has incredible love. It's just that she wanted to make this sort of stuff. And I think she had like a Instagram. It's like, oh, for those who are twisting this, I love you. For this, I love you, you know? And response. I thought that was a really powerful response because she didn't back down from her beliefs, but she just let people know like, hey, we love you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And the cancel culture thing is like, as soon as you apologize, like, oh, well, I'll do everything for everybody. Yeah. You're kind of already swept aside and it's like too late, you know, like it doesn't work to apologize to the mob kind of thing. So
it kind of doesn't. The cancel culture is just unstoppable. But the thing about cancel culture that's so weird is it's like so particular on random things. So obviously, like
it's changing.
The alternative side,
is.
like is she got cancel cultured because of the alternative thing. But like, there's also like, you know, Roe v. Wade, you know, got overturned. You know what I mean? And so like, okay, people talking about like pro-life things could be like completely like cancel cultured. Yeah. You know, it's just like such a weird. It
keeps changing
thing,
too. You know, like
you know.
One day you're cancel cultured for one thing, and then the next that will be the cool thing. You know, like it's constantly shifting.
Right.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why people love Candace so much is the fact that she's consistent. Right. You know what I mean? That she really has been the same. And you guys did that video on Instagram, which check it out, where she says the same stuff. Like she's always been kind of consistent the whole way through.
And she said this is her audience she wants to serve.
Right.
So she's going to keep doing that type of content.
Right. I think it is cool that she's always kind of been consistent and stuck up for her beliefs in the mix of it. Um, Speaking of the Cameron family, is Kirk Cameron is trying to do that story hour. There have been so many articles about the fact that like a lot of libraries are doing those drag story hours, for like little kids, which is just so sad. But Kirk Cameron was trying to do like a Christian story hour.
Yeah.
I think he tried on like 50 different libraries or something. But the problem is that
got shot down every time.
the hard thing is like, is it? Who knows if it was like motivate? The problem with those like those, I almost feel like they're clickbaiting. But I do think it's a great idea to have like, maybe it's a great idea to like actually have like a faith story hour.
Hey, I mean, if you're gonna have drag, let's do faith hour. Let's do everything. Can we all have our
That's
spaces?
the thing that's so weird to me about our age. To go back to what we were talking about, is it's not it wants to be able to have like people be able to believe different things, but it won't allow actual multiculturalism.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's like, okay, if you say you want to have a drag hour, then why can't you have a Christian hour?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you say like, hey, you want to have a television channel that focuses on like alternative content, why can't you have one that focuses on traditional content? Yeah. Like it's weird that it's like that you only can do this. It's like, okay, if you want people to be able to hold different beliefs, then like why won't you allow that each one of these things are possible?
Yeah.
I think that is probably why the Christian community rallied behind Candace so much, or even like a whole bunch of community, because it just feels hypocritical. It's like, hey, look, like you're saying like, okay, you can have this pushed in every single area, but it's not allowed to have just a traditional like husband and wife relationship. Like it seems odd. Like you're not allowed to have a traditional woman-man relationship. Yeah. It seems odd that you can't have both. And like, I understand like on the flip side, the argument is like, okay, well, most historical content has been traditional, but it's like, we know from consumer viewing patterns that most people want to watch new content. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So if it's like 90% of the current content has alternative characters in it, like why can't they also have Christian characters? Right. Like if 90% of the, like, sure, maybe in the 50s there were Christian characters, but it's like that most people don't dig through to find historical content. Mm-hmm. Like they're watching the new content. Like if majority of these Christian movies on like Lifetime and Hallmark are pushing more alternative content, like why can't like we have also like new content that is traditional. Like it seems perfectly rational. The market proves that out because obviously Great American Family broke records.
Exactly. And then
the mix of it,
the whole Disney debacle,
and Disney did terrible. Strange Worlds, because people don't want to see that. Mm-hmm. And like one of the things that a lot of people miss is that most of the money that these films make is overseas. Yeah. And it's like, if you think about it, like most of the Middle East, like they don't want to watch that. Like most of, like China and India, like they have rules against watching it. And like, it's like a huge swath of the world. And the other thing that just blows my mind, which is pulls into another controversy that's happened recently, is how like so many of these like cancel culture moments are so selective. And I feel like the reason why like the faith community has felt so assaulted by it, because it feels so selectively targeted just at people of faith. Because like think about the fact that like Apple, like the big controversy that happened recently is like Apple limited their AirPlay. Okay, so it's a way that you can share documents from one AirDrop. They limited their AirDrop from one phone to the next in China, which prohibited the protests from happening. Now, none of their like employees got mad. There was no letters of people getting mad about it. You know what I mean? Like there was nobody angry about it, but like people went nuts over the fact that they like brought Jordan Peterson back to Twitter. Right. You know what I mean? Like, or Babylon Bee. Yeah. Like people, like it's a Christian comedy site. People totally went nuts on that, which felt like so hypocritical when it's like, oh my gosh, like you literally like are like blocking people protesting like the CCP, you know what I mean, for their own freedom. Crimes. You know what I mean? Like people get extremely mad on like one element, but on the flip side, like they're not mad about like these horrible atrocities that happen in other places, and like most of those people from Netflix to Apple have said, hey, look, we are going to apply to whatever the laws are in each country. You know what I mean? So like, we're going to apply to the sensibilities of each country. And so I just think that it's like extremely interesting. I mean, like even like look at most of the tech companies, like they change their rules on like homosexuality or things like that in like the Middle East. You know what I mean? Like for the products that they do. And like there's zero backlash from like from their employees in the US. Like there's zero backlash from like the cancel culture community. Okay, like there's no punishment on that.
It was like Pride Month when everyone does the rainbow icons, and then all the Middle Eastern branches didn't do that.
Yeah, they didn't do that, and there's zero backlash about it.
Yeah.
But for some reason, like there is a ridiculous backlash when someone even as nice as like Candace Cameron is like, "Hey, we want to do," you know, like it just. I feel like the problem that the cancel culture community doesn't understand is that, and the reason why there's such a well of support. And why these things are doing well like that, or like Pure Flix, you know, or like all of these different elements, or even Twitter now, because like people feel like, hey, there's a champion who's just saying like it's okay, you know what I mean? And like it feels like one group has been targeted too much, you know, and it's like, it just feels like it's very targeted at one group and one group only, American Christians. You know, and maybe that is false. I don't know, like in the mix of it, but it feels that way, you know, don't you think so?
Yeah. No.
In the mix. And it seems like everything else, like Hindus have extremely strict rules on what can come into India. You know what I mean? Like there's no like cancel culture mob against like what they're doing in India.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or Saudi Arabia or any of that thing. There's just a total cancel culture mob for anything that like Candace didn't even ask them Lifetime to get rid of their alternative characters. She just literally said she wanted to do faithful characters.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
That's the hypocrisy part of it too, is where you're constantly shifting the goalposts too. And then they can't even follow their own rules. And they have to start eating each other at some point. Because if you keep pushing the bounds of what's acceptable with every exception, you're going to run out of things to do. And the next thing you know, it's like, well, now everybody's breaking the rules. Because there's that thing in China where like they make so many rules, they already have you on something.
Right.
That they just
yes,
wait.
That is a famous thing. They have you on something already. If you really like what you're listening to as we're talking, please consider subscribing. If you are already a subscriber, please share and comment. We would love to hear from you and to be able to know what to talk about.